Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Keeping It Real, a podcast where we talk about real life issues and as the title said, keeping it real. Um, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about knife crime and looting. We're going to talk about the main causes, and I also have like an interview with a knife crime organizer who runs his own like organizations called Attentive. Obviously, if you want to see more of this episodes of Keeping It Real, make sure to subscribe to my channel. It'll help my channel grow. And also, if you want to keep on like daily updates on when I'm gonna post an episode, then you can go follow my social media, which will be Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So yeah, without way, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, my name is Montel Neville, Managing Director of Attentive Social Enterprise.
So tell us about yourself and what your organization do.
Okay, so I'll tell you about me first of all. I'm the Managing Director of Attentive Social Enterprise, which I'll go into in 1 second. I'm also the Chair of a Community Scrutiny Panel. What the Scrutiny Panel does is it oversees the police use of powers like stop and search and use of force. I set up the panel in Bedfordshire, and then I now run one for Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire. My colleague now does the Bedfordshire one. I'm also a police ethics advisor, so I work nationally on advising policing on loads of different issues. I'm in a conference after this and in another conference tomorrow. I'm also the chair of a school academy trust.
Very busy man.
Very, very busy man. And then you asked me a question, what does my organisation do? My organisation, Attentive, our theme is to engage, educate and empower. So we engage people making a positive difference in their communities. We educate people on a whole range of issues. One of our topics is around gang crime and knife crime. We've had a whole range of projects on that. And we empower people to make decisions.
Oh, okay. How long would you say you've been working for this
Okay, so good question. I've been working in communities for 25 years now. So started in 2000. My first job in communities was a community ranger dealing with antisocial behaviour. Then I was a community engagement manager, and then I was a partnership manager. When I was a partnership manager, I began working with Bedfordshire Police in 2005. So I've been working with Bedfordshire Police for 20 years from 2005. From 2015, I set up and ran the Community Scrutiny Panel. So I've been doing it for quite a long time. And from 2017, Attentive Social Enterprise.
Nah, that's crazy because it's really like you can see like like where you're from like at the start and then like years ago, but now you're here and you're starting like running your organization now. Can I also ask what made you want to like start your organization like?
So my organisation actually is a problem-solving organisation. What I learnt up to about the mid-2010s, about 2014 and 15, is a lot of people came to me for advice and guidance.
Okay.
I was acting as a consultant to local authorities. I had a lot of friends in policing, but there were issues and frictions between young people and the police. I have lots of friends who are in the police force at different rank levels, and they asked me if I could facilitate some engagement with them. And actually, Attentive was born to act as that social justice organisation to give young people a platform that we can build their life skills, but also be involved in making a positive difference and demystifying policing. So we've done a lot of work to demystify what the police are doing.
Okay. Another question. What do you think are like, in your personal opinion, are the main like causes of knife crime?
Okay, so that's a big question. So let me just split the question up. Okay, in terms of from a legal point of view, there's lots of laws around what we call knife crime, quote unquote, because the actual legal definition is offensive weapons. Okay, and then underneath offensive weapons, you got bladed articles. And then there's many different drivers for people using offensive weapons or bladed articles. So let me just talk about some of the main ones.
Yeah.
These are what I call the big ticket items.
Yeah.
probably the biggest ticket items is people who deal in drugs.
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like especially when you have so many like drug dealers in one area, this could be like territorial and you
Yes,
might protect
that's
it.
100% correct. And what they do, they often don't go out to stab people, but they carry a knife to help so that people don't steal their drugs. That's one sort of group. Another group is people who don't intend to use a knife, but they carry it for fear. And the fear could be because of where they're going to. Either they're going to an area or they feel they're being bullied in a school or college. So they carry it in their bag or on their person for self-protection. Those are the two like big ticket items. Underneath that, there's a number of other drivers. The next driver is people who carry an offensive weapon to commit another crime. For example, car crime, burglary. More often than not, they'll have a knife to break in.
Yeah.
Sometimes some people might stop them or interrupt them and they've got a knife on them. Okay. So that is like another big ticket item of what's involved in that. And then the next one down from that is domestic. With domestic is sometimes you may hear stories of a partner, could be male or female, same gender, or a young person and a parent. There's conflict happens and somebody picks up a knife. Okay. So in that situation, but let me tell you what also constitutes offensive weapons and knife crime. If you buy a knife and you're underage, that goes into the knife crime statistics. So if you're 14 and you buy a bladed article, so you buy a, for example, a carpet cutting knife, Stanley knife, then that is classed as knife crime. The other thing, just to add, is the offence is carrying a knife or bladed article in a public place without good reason. So there's a sentence following that. And what do the police mean by that? What they mean in a public place, colleges and schools are not public places, are they? No. So they've got a separate law around that. The other thing is around shopping centres, not really public places, or businesses, they're not public places. You can carry knives in them if it's for a lawful reason.
What would you say are the lawful reasons?
For example, let's say you're a builder.
Okay.
Then you might need a whole range of tools. You've got a tool belt. You're a car mechanic. Quite often have tools around you, don't you? You've got a toolbox. So you carry that. You're going fishing. Okay, so you can see those sort of things. You're a caterer. So you've got a catering bag around you. But in all those situations, even if you're doing those jobs, you can't still walk around like this with a knife. Okay. So just to make that clear to anybody who is a caterer or is a builder, you still can't walk around it like that. You need to have it hidden away, or you've just purchased it and it's still within this wrapper.
Okay. You mentioned a lot of like topics that like I've always thought about, because when I was like learning about knife crime in the assembly back in like primary school, I thought it was only like gang culture stuff. But then when I got older, I realized more about there's other like crimes that involve knife. Like domestic abuse. Carrying a knife for protection. So yeah, it's very.
And then let me just talk about that last category that you just mentioned, because this one is the media narrative that everybody thinks is knife crime. And that is, sometimes we see sensationalized in the media people in bandanas with a long sort of sword attacking each other, going at each other like that. That represents 2.5% of cases. 2.5%. 98% are all the other ones that I mentioned to you. So the ones that they carry those matchets are a tiny percentage, even though we know that officers go after them and it's wrong for people to do that. And let me just talk about that for a moment, because it's really an important topic. There are 2 police units actually 3 that focus upon that. In the county that we are, Luton and Bedfordshire, we have Bedfordshire Police, and they have specialist units. One of them is called Operation Bosun. Have you heard of them?
Have not.
Operation Bosun are a dedicated unit of police officers who just do nothing but look at knife crime.
Okay.
Operation Costello is a dedicated unit who look at gangs, organised crime, who cross county borders, etc. And then the unit which I oversee is called the Joint Protective Services Unit, and they're the armed police. You've seen them go in with the NATO helmets and the guns, right? And those three units often work together to address issues like this. And then let's just talk about the perpetrators for a second of that last group that we just mentioned. What happens, and I do this through our workshops, I'll talk about our workshops if you want me to, or the work that we've done as Attentive on this, but I'll just touch on one. One of the things that a perpetrator does, a perpetrator will recruit a teenager. Because teenagers blend in, don't they, with other teenagers. And what that teenager will do is they will offer a gift, something of value to their peers. It could be trainers, it could be a laptop, it could be iPhone. And then once they wheel them in, they say, okay, you're going to have to do something for me. Hide the bag. And in that bag will be, what's going to be in the bag? Drugs or
a gun,
right? That's what's going to be in the bag, right? And then they've got them. And then they say, take the bag from here to there. And then they start transporting the bags. And then they get them to do that. And then what they do more often than not is they set them up to be mugged. And then they steal the gun or the drugs. And they say, right, you owe me. You're going to have to work for me for nothing. And then when they start working for them, they say to these people, they look at who the people are. If they're young and female, then they get them to be the couriers. So they start carrying things around, or they start hiding stuff. If they're quite big looking, they don't care if they're 13 or 14, but they look big. Right? Or 15, but they look big. They get them to be the people who go after the other gangs. So they get 3 or 4 of them, and they say, okay, what we want you to do is to either beat somebody up or stand with this next man while he punches somebody. And because you're backing him up, it looks like there's 4 or 5 of you, so they're not going to do nothing. But more often than not, they all get caught up in it, don't they?
What do you personally think of, what areas do you think like are affected by knife crime the most? Or
what areas? And it's interesting that people talk about areas, don't they? And that's a myth. That people talk about areas, because let me tell you what happens, right? Let's talk about Luton, and then let's talk about Bedfordshire. In Luton, there are 226,000 people. There are 20 wards in Luton, right? There are 2 main colleges, okay? There's 1 big shopping centre, okay? So if we talk about it from that point of view, people will talk about the certain areas and certain communities, won't they? Right? And you would have heard about certain areas. Okay, but in those areas, in each of these wards, there's about 10,000, 15,000 people live in each of these areas, right? But the main places that the teenagers go to are where? Where do the teenagers go to?
Town centre.
The town centre? Right. So most of it's going to be around the town centre, right? Then where else do teenagers go to? Colleges. Right? So in those 2 areas, you're going to get the vast majority of issues, aren't you? Okay. The other thing that is a myth is people look at areas like Farley Hill, Lucy Farm, Marsh Farm, Hocker Ring, don't they? Okay. Some of the biggest perpetrators, apart from those 2 areas, which is town centre, and the ground that we're on now is called the Barnfield Ward. And everybody thinks, but the Barnfield Ward is wealthy, but it's also got 5,000 young people, teenagers. Okay. The other areas don't have 5,000 teenagers, do they? Okay. And if you go to any of these areas in Luton during the daytime, who's there? Nobody. Because all in work or college, right? Okay.
But in like weekends, it's packed.
But even on the weekend, they're mainly in town, aren't they?
So obviously during discussions of knife crime from other people, a lot of like politicians and like other people that in like the political party, they say it is majority of knife crime is caused by ethnic minorities, but even though that is disproven, from like a statistic saying like 69% of people who carry knives are white. But my question is like, why do you think many people like those politicians believe in that statement?
Because what happens in our society is a lot of people are brought up who are fair-minded and open-minded and empathetic, but we also have a lot of people who are ignorant and racist. We do have racist people in this country. And what they do is they look for stereotypes and they look to reinforce stereotypes. One thing that I always say to people is in every different ethnicity and people from every single country, the vast majority of people are not offenders. Would you agree? crime.
Yeah, I would agree.
Vast majority are not offenders. And another way to look at it is when we're looking at police interaction with local people, they have police-defined ethnicity and they have self-defined ethnicity. Almost 60 to 70% of the time, a person says that a police officer defined me wrong. So most times people are defining them or making an assumption about what a person is. And I'm quite sure that if you were to ask 100 people in your college who was mixed race, you probably get it wrong a lot of the time. Would you agree? Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing around this area is around people's lived experience. Okay. So a lot of people are brought up in a certain way. They're brought up to be either open-minded or ignorant. So one of the things that we do for our programs is educate people and open their minds. Okay. And people can be an offender of any type, and we want to stop people from being offenders. They can be a victim or they can be neither. And they can be a social advocate. A social advocate, a person like me and there's other people who go around and open people's minds and get people to do good things.
Yeah. It's also really interesting about a statement because I came up with my own conclusion about that statement is because as white people are like more likely to carry knives, as says statistics. I feel like most like news channels, they push the ones that are like where the perpetrator or the victim is black and or like in an ethnic minority, and they just keep on pushing it. So that's why people think why ethnic minorities like the cause of.
You are right, 100% correct. What a lot of people do is they consume what's in the media, and a lot of things in the media, as you quite rightly talked about, is if there is an offender, and this even happened when I was even your age and younger than you, was they'll say a person carried a knife or was arrested for X, Y, Z. But if they're black, then they say a black person. So then people think, are they black? Or you get people thinking, oh, that was a really bad thing. I wonder if they're black or white, and they don't mention if they're white.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's quite often they highlight ethnicity if it's negative, but not if it's
in
positive.
like a positive
Yeah.
view. Obviously, you talked about the main causes of knife crime and like what other people's opinions on what main causes of knife crime. What action should be taken to decrease knife crime?
Okay, so I mentioned earlier that there are knife crime is fairly complicated. So let's talk about what Attentive does and then what the government does nationally and locally. And we'll talk about those three different things. Okay. First of all, what we've done, we've just done a project called Power Youth Action. And what Power Youth Action did is we did a consultation with people, young people your age, across Bedfordshire. And we chose three groups of people. We chose those who are either on school councils or young people doing positive things in community groups. Right? We choose young people who've been kicked out of schools or in exclusion units who've been making bad choices. And then we chose a group of people, 50% in the middle, because the middle often gets left out. Okay. We also chose people in all the different areas that we spoke about, but in areas that we not spoke about, like Limbury Mead, like Wigmore. People don't talk about them much, do they? Like Dallow. These areas that people don't talk about, like there's a few others that we spoke about, Stopsley, of course. So we spoke to people about them. We did another project just before that called Taking the Right Path. Taking the Right Path, we did 120 workshops across all the schools and colleges in Luton, including Barnfield College and Luton Sixth Form College in our schools. And that was about educating people around gang crime and knife crime, and then teaching them about like the perpetrators and the reasons and the drivers and everybody's roles and responsibilities. Before that, we did a project called Another Way. What Another Way was about is conflict and conflict resolution. Sometimes, as I mentioned, people carry knives because of fear, or sometimes to intimidate other people because they think they are bad man or bad girl, because some girls carry knives sometimes. So another way was to teach young people about another way of solving conflicts. If they need help and support, what do they do? It's about mentoring, it's about support, it's about advice, guidance. So that was another way. And then we had another project called Solutions. So with Solutions, that was very much about working with people on what they think the solutions are to knife crime. Quickly talk about the role of local government and then central government and then local government. So what the national governments do, they do two things in the main. One, they collect money from people and they spend money. Number two,
like
taxes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they also pass laws. So in this context, what they can do is they can compel anyone to do anything in this country. So what they've done is they've passed lots of laws around gang crime and knife crime. If you want me to, I can talk about some of the laws later on. In terms of spending money, what they do is they've spent money on something called a violent reduction units in 20 places, including one here for Bedfordshire. And a violent reduction unit is specific to address gang crime and knife crime. And then the other thing, talk about local government. Have you heard of local government?
It's kind of like the council.
Yeah. The local council. So what the local council do is they've got a number of different jobs that they have to do. One of them, they've got a department called Trading Standards, and they go around doing what's called test purchases to prevent people or shops from selling knives to underage kids.
Okay.
Another thing that they do is they do target hardening and lighting. People sell drugs in places whereby they're very dark, right? And in parks. So they have lights everywhere, and the council all do CCTV cameras. Okay. The other thing that councils are responsible for is youth work and youth provision. And even if they don't have enough youth workers themselves, they fund and support other charities to have youth workers to divert people away from getting caught up into gang culture.
What do you personally think the government should be actually doing to slow down the knife crime rate?
So one of the things that to add to that, there's a job role called a police crime commissioner. I don't know if you've heard of a police crime commissioner.
I think I've heard of it.
Okay, so they've got one in almost every area of the country, about 39 of the 43 police forces, and we've got one in Bedfordshire. Good friend of mine called John Tizard. And they've got a statutory role to hold the chief constable to account and to have a engagement plan to engage people, but also have a listening plan. And they also work with something called the Bedfordshire VERU, the Violent Reduction Unit. The first thing that all these should do is listen to people. So when I talked about Power Youth Action, we consulted and we learned a lot from listening to people. Do you know one thing that we learned? Is that all these organisations are running around doing what they think, not what people have asked them to do.
Yeah.
They've made assumptions without listening to people from their needs assessments. Okay. So the first thing, go back to basics and consult with people. Consult with all the different stakeholders. That's number one. Number two, provide pathways so people don't choose that life.
Yeah.
They don't need to choose that life. Number three, help people into better jobs so that they're not dependent or desperate, that they'll get caught up, that they have to go down that line.
Yeah.
Number four, they pass laws, and they've just passed a new Policing and Crime Act that came out in 2025. My advice on that, waste of time, because what it did is it banned zombie knives.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a good idea to ban that? Because when they told me they bring out the law to ban zombie knives, I said, actually, they're already banned.
Yeah.
You can't ban them even more, can you?
Yeah, I feel like I remember, I don't know if it was last year, but there was this big thing going on that there was a loophole in one of the laws involving zombie knives where there's 3 categories to identify a zombie knife if it had a sharp edge and a serrated edge, but it needs to have a name to identify themselves.
But that's a myth. That's why when I talked to you at the very beginning, I told you about the Offensive Weapons Act, and then I talked about bladed articles, right? And then I talked about sharp implements. Okay, that could be anything. So, for example, you know those plastic forks.
Yeah.
Okay. If you break off 2 of the things, then you've got 2 things sticking out, right?
Yeah.
That is an offensive weapon then. Okay. It's not a knife, is it?
No.
But you can stab people with it, can't you? Right. So the thing about the Offensive Weapons Act, all those are already covered.
Yeah.
Anything that you can stab somebody with or hit somebody with, if it's that big or bigger, that's covered already, right? So yeah, there's other laws that say, okay, this particular law says that actually that doesn't include a serrated edged knife, but the Offensive Weapons Act does. And there's something called PACE, which stands for the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984. That's what they use to stop and search. So they can stop and search anyone that they got reasonable suspicion that they think they're carrying an illegal item. Okay. And then, as I mentioned to you before, if they find something on somebody, they put it out and they say, what's your lawful reason for carrying that? If you can't explain a lawful reason for carrying that, you get arrested. So the point I was making is it's already illegal under different laws.
You talked about what the government should be doing. Do you think now in like 2025, are they doing a good job at it, or?
Okay, so what's interesting is I work on plans, and I always say to people you need to have a short, medium, and long-term plan. Okay, and quite often you have to revisit your plan and see what more you can do. One of the things that governments locally and nationally haven't done very well is consult. And then if you consult, you have to realign and reimagine and go back to people, because there's always going to be people at risk. And because I mentioned it before, there's always going to be different priority groups, different people. Some of the crimes are very difficult to solve in of themselves. And let me give you an example. An example is probably 60% of people in prison, when they woke up that morning, they didn't know they're going to commit that crime. Okay, so it's hard to stop them if even they didn't know it, right? Okay, and you probably hear that sort of thing before, whereby something happens and people retaliate or they do something that they didn't go planning to do whatever they did. They get caught up in it. Sometimes you're caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes you get angry. Okay. The other thing which I didn't touch on earlier is mental health. Okay. Now, most people have got a mental health which is quite calm. Some people can get rattled by something. Other people are at the top all the time, aren't they? Right. So there's these different levels, and then throw that into the mix. Okay. And then throw somebody being pushed to something, whatever they're being pushed to. It's very difficult for the government to step in and try and stop that person retaliating, isn't it? Okay. The government can only do so much. But what has the government done? One of the things that they do, as you probably know through the Home Office, is they support the criminal justice, which includes policing. Now, in every police force, they have a certain number of officers. In Bedfordshire, we've got 1,400 police officers. And then the chief constables always say, in every force, we don't have enough officers, we don't have enough money. Okay. So what they do, what the government does is they say, okay, you can apply for extra money for a few different things. So because Luton has been highlighted as one of those areas that need extra support to address issues around gang crime and knife crime, they've got just been awarded £7 million to target that and to help reduce that. And that goes into people like Operation Bosun and organisations like Operation Costello, focusing upon those particular crime types.
Many articles, like news, segments, say that knife crime the rate of knife crime has risen like very highly due to the fact of social media and like drill music. Do you think if like that's the case, and if so, like how does it like cause it?
Okay, so let's break that down into segments. So when we talk about drill music, what they mean by drill music is one gang making, it could be a music video, and it could be a skit about another person in another gang. Okay, it's usually having a go at them, insulting them and attacking them. The person in that other gang looks at it and think, wow, or his friends look at it and say, you're being disrespected here, you're going to need to go and get him because look what they're doing. Okay, so what they then do is they go and they have a conflict, and there's been a number of cases whereby people have risen to that level, and there's been people who's been gone backward and forward at each other with conflict. One of the things that we've done through our program is we've said, if you're interested in music or dance or making videos, come and do it with us, and then we're getting lots of people to do that in a positive way. And then we're saying to people, if you've got conflict with somebody else, that's fine. We will work with you on a better way to deal with conflict. Okay. So that's with regards to, it's not the music themselves, it's what they do with the music.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned social media. A lot of people say, and we did podcast, and a lot of the young people talk about how social media was a problem. Social media is a tool.
Yeah.
A hammer and a chisel is a tool. If you use hammer and a chisel for the right purpose, they're great. Would you agree?
Yeah.
But if you use it for the wrong purpose, it's
Yeah.
going to be bad, right?
Yeah.
So social media used in a bad way is going to have a bad outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not social media in of itself; it's people's attitude and what they do with it. So what we do, and what there's other organisations apart from Attentive, we work to encourage people to make the right choices and to be respectful to each other, because the more we create that, then the better people are towards each other.
No. Okay. This is my final question. So obviously, do you have like any advice to like parents? Because on this podcast, there's a lot of parents listening to this. Do you have any advice for like parents that are worried about their kids getting involved in like knife crime and like gangs, and what they should do?
Okay. So for any parents out there, if you feel that your son or even your daughter is at the danger of getting involved in knife crime, there's lots of organisations, both locally and nationally, that can give you advice and support. Okay. There's people like Childline can do it, NSPCC can do it. There are special Gangs Line phone numbers and Gang Line websites that you can go to. Another one that you can go to, I know people don't like going to the police, a lot of them,
Yeah.
but there are teams within Bedfordshire Police, like the Community Cohesion team, who can be very empathetic and very supportive. They won't always just do an arrest. You can say, for example, why don't you do workshops with certain groups of people, and that way you're not highlighting the individual. What I always say to people is, what's really important is that we all do whatever we can to keep everybody safe, and to keep all our young people safe, people your age, your peers' age, and everybody else's age, and all the children of your parents who are listening. It's important that we keep them all safe. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Right. So we must cooperate and work with anybody who we can to get that done, to speak to whoever we can, to work with whoever we can, because ultimately we don't want anybody being arrested, because it would ruin their lives.
Yeah.
You can get 4 years in prison just for carrying it.
Yeah.
Okay. There's organisations that people can go to which are diversionary if they need a organisation to keep them out of trouble. And more often than not, people need mentors. So find yourself a mentor for your boy or your daughter.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this episode of Keeping It Real. Obviously, if you liked it, like this podcast, you want to see more, like, comment, and subscribe. It costs you nothing. It helps you immensely. Also, if you want to get updates on any new podcast episodes, follow my social media, which is Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And do you want to say anything to them?
And just a final word from me. First of all, thank you for listening. Anybody who wants to learn more or find out more about who we are, go to our YouTube channel, type in Attentive, which is ATT10TIVE, into YouTube. Sultan Enterprise will come up, and have a look at the many videos that we've got on there, and you will learn a huge amount. Thank you.
Right. This is it for the episode. Thank you all for watching, and stay tuned, and come back next week where we will talk about another topic on this Keeping It Real podcast.